Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to do a mod review on a mod that we've already covered before but has since received a major update. You guys might remember the Chaos Ogre mod, a mod that introduces Chaos Ogres, Undivided and also God Touch to various Chaos factions that you can pick up. Well, now it's been updated to have its own Chaos faction. Yep, you can play as Chaos Ogres and it's pretty interesting, so we're going to talk about that today. Let's talk about the faction effects and lord effects. So, units gain +5 charge bonus per rank achieved, all armies. Dark Fortress settlement buildings grant additional Chaos Ogre warband recruitment capacity. Army replenishment in foreign territory. Growth per region +15 after winning a battle for all provinces, and also it's affected by all characters. Income post-battle loot +30% in all armies. Upkeep +25% for demon units. Tribute from vassals +100%. And for the lord effects we have as followings. This lord will be wounded instead of killed in battle. Yeah, he's immortal. Physical resistance +10% for Chaos Ogre units in Lord's Army, and immune to psychology for Chaos Ogre units in Lord's Army. This is going to play in a very similar sense to your Chaos Warriors, because this is in the Chaos Warrior culture, but it's a little bit different in a number of places. So let's jump into the campaign, because there is a fair amount to talk about. So your faction begins in the Northern Chaos Wastes, right in front of the Great Bastion for Grand Cafe, and you are going to be playing as a Chaos Warrior faction, so keep that in mind. You might want to download another sub-mod to add in more Dark Fortresses, as there's only really 2 in Grand Cafe, and then you're incentivized to stay in the north. That being said, you do get a decent amount of tribute from your vassals, a lot more than the Warriors of Chaos normally get, so you should be fine to keep pushing your way down and trading settlements. And because of this, you are incentivized to fight the other Chaos factions. You will have Village right next to you, who has a potential vassal from the very beginning, and then also Zatan and Kolek around there too. Your troops are strong enough to be able to deal with them if you start upgrading them, and you can forego getting any Warriors of Chaos really from the very beginning. Mechanically, your faction is going to play like a Warriors of Chaos faction, so you're going to have the same tech tree, which there is one that focuses quite heavily on buffing up your Chaos Ogres. Believe me, that's more than enough considering that they're quite strong, and you do have the Gifts of Chaos also, which that means that you can boost up your faction quite well. You don't have to go with just Chaos Ogres, but you are incentivized to do so. I do like a little bit of a mix every now and then. I've been playing around for a few hours. Honestly, just a few more orders coming in, because you will still have access to building up for Chaos Warriors and so on, can really flesh out your army quite well. You'll be starting off with a few Chaos Ogres, and you'll start being able to get a lot more as you start constructing them. So they'll pop up in the same warband recruitment system, but it's much better. I would say that you get a lot more from there. The Ogres cannot be upgraded through the Wargrand upgrade system, so that means that when you pick up Chaos Ogres, you've got them there. They're strong enough to last on their own. This will be noticeable when you start going into your building tab, because you have 3 buildings focusing around the Ogres. One being like the generic Undivided Ogres that gives you a fair amount of new units plus access to a hero. There's also the Advanced Military section, which gives you access to the God-touched Chaos Ogres, so like 1 for Khorne, 1 for Sinesh, 1 for Tzeentch, 1 for Nurgle, alongside a hero for that too, which means that you'll have access to all the different magic for them. I quite like that. And then there is an infrastructure building. That infrastructure building is going to focus around just kind of boosting up your typical infrastructure. You don't have the big money push that you normally get with the Chaos Warrior factions as it stands. You can get up to like a 10 stack before turn 10, maybe even sooner, depending on how lucky you get with the RNG system, and if you mix it up with some Chaos Trolls, you're going to be in for a much better position. What I've been doing in my own personal campaign is going full monster. I did get a Hell Cannon though, and that's mostly because I really wanted a Hell Cannon up and running. You don't have a varied roster like the Ogres do, so no Blood Belchers, no Cavalry, but what you do have is access to a lot of magic and a lot of devastating style troops. Now your Legendary Lord hits quite hard. Think of him very similar to Tamukan, but an undivided version. So he does get a lot of buffs, which is going to focus around boosting up the Chaos Ogre units themselves, giving him extra weapon strength, extra, just damage in general, campaign movement range. You can boost up yourself and your Chaos Ogres to be very, very devastating. I like him as a character. He also does get his own big Plague Toad, where they're called like the Devourer. There's a lot of these Plague Toad situations where you're going to get quite a lot of mounts, because you can get a generic Lord too. You can't God Touch him, but you do have access to Gifts of Chaos, which I think is pretty good. So it's just an upgrade system to make him even stronger, very similar to the whole system for the Ogres themselves. And you'll be going through the motions of a normal campaign, just pushing your way down into Grand Cafe eventually after you've taken out some of the Chaos factions to get yourself some extra vassal money. The only difference here to a Warriors of Chaos campaign is you won't be jumping into a lot of 20 stacks very early on, because you're not going to be using Marauders, which are very cheap. You'll be using Chaos Ogres. There are Gifts of Chaos that you can end up getting, so extra missile resistance, which is very valuable when you're dealing with Cafe and range, as for some reason I have noticed that Cafe seems to favor just recruiting a lot of archers and crossbows lately. Now, as usual, especially where you are, once you've started expanding, you're going to want a second and third army. You do have a decent amount of income despite the fact that you're recruiting Chaos Ogre units. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. You can get a Chaos Lord, you can get a Chaos Sorcerer Lord, or you can get yourself a Chaos Ogre Tyrant, which are going to be very, very strong in their own right. They've got a melee focus, as you can imagine, with these Ogre Tyrants, but what makes them a little bit different here is they have their unique skill line, once again boosting up Chaos Ogre units, giving them extra physical resistance, for example, and just in general some extra ammunition if you need it, because you do have some units with some pistols, but afterwards you can actually decide to dedicate it. It's a very different type of dedication. Rather than doing a whole Path to Glory system, it's a skill up, which will give you buffs focusing on Undivided, Sinesh, Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and the idea here is that you can have one Chaos Ogre Tyrant focusing on one thing, and all the others focusing on the others. You can get regeneration, extra melee defense, all the usual stuff there. They also have the Boons of Chaos too, which is kind of like the big name system, and they come with a great weapon, which makes them quite destructive. You're definitely more than able to use other Lord options, but it's kind of like how it worked with the Omens of Destruction DLC, right? The new Lord, the Blood Speaker. You want to use that if you're using the specified units, and I guess it kind of makes sense. Alongside that, you do have a generic hero which you'll get fairly early into your campaign. This is the Ogre Bruiser, and it's pretty damn good. So he's got a bit of a range weapon there. It's a little bit of a nod to the whole fact that some ogres do end up working with the Chaos Dwarfs. He's got access to a range weapon and also a melee weapon. He's got a unique skill line which will allow you to get more reputation with the other Chaos factions, and they've also got Bodyguard and so on. It's one of those heroes that you're going to want up and running for a while, and the damage he can do on range is pretty damn tasty too. You're going to be running around with one or two of them as you progress through your campaign. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting, obviously, because that's not the only one that you have access to. You've also got 4 different style of unique God-touched ogres, all very, very cool looking actually, and they've all got access to their own special styling. So the Khorne one, very, very good for melee, no range weapons, of course, that makes sense. The Nurgle one has got access to spells of Nurgle, but also still being quite powerful in its own right because it's got a great weapon. The Khorne one has additional hand weapons, by the way. You've got the Sinesh one, which has got access to the Lore of Sinesh, and is very similar to like Skrarg in that sense. It's pretty decent in melee combat, which is pretty damn good. And then you've got access to the Tzeentchian one with the Lore of Tzeentch. That one's got a great weapon also. But the idea here is you've got different laws of magic. In case you want to actually use the Lore of Sinesh, the Lore of Tzeentch, and the Lore of Nurgle, you don't have to go get a Chaos Sorcerer, although in some cases you might, because obviously the mount is quite decent for that. Here you've got a massive push for a lot of unique stuff. I'm a big fan. I'm a very, very big fan. We never really had God-touched ogres barring the Plague Ogres, and it's a massive shame considering that I think a lot of people want to see more of that cool stuff coming in, right? It does require you go to the advanced military building, so it's going to take you until tier 4 generic on your main building and then getting all the way up there. But considering that you're going to be getting growth as long as you're getting into combat quite a lot, which as a Chaos Ogre faction, you know, in general, if you're pushing into Cafe, that's not going to take a long time, you'll be able to get these up and running relatively quickly without that much of an issue. I'm a big fan of them. They look absolutely phenomenal. I'm actually going to be taking some inspiration from these so I can build up my own custom ones for the tabletop. Because you can give them marks on the tabletop. Well, not like characters. There's no Chaos Ogre characters, which is annoying. And this is the extent of your Chaos Ogre roster. So you've got quite a lot of heroes, lords. There's 2 of the same lord there because you can be mounted. There is quite a lot to play around with. Paired up with the fact that you've got access to the Chaos Warriors, you're going to be laughing as you have just so much variety to play with. And if you're using a lot of mods, well, it's going to be even better for you because there's some cases where some mods add a lot more. You've also got the Plague Ogres, but I haven't added them here because they're not really a modded faction. Remember that this mod also allows you to get Chaos Ogres with different other factions too. It's just this is now, I'm pushing the highlight here of having its own unique playthrough because it's kind of fun. They look incredible too. They look absolutely awesome. This is what Chaos Ogres always kind of look to me, which is really funny because if you go on the Games Workshop website, you can see what the actual old school models were. And when you're a kid, right, you see them looking better than they actually are. Because like the Chaos Ogre models on the tabletop look pretty damn awful. I'm not gonna I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But yeah, no, these are super great. All the themed ones, I would say they even look a little bit better than the Plague Ogres, for example. Like the Chaos Ogres of Nurgle look really terrifying. The Ogres of Sinesh really mutated, kind of like that Glutos character, which many people see in Age of Sigmar now. The Tzeentchian ones are bit vanilla-ish, but I like the sword. Same thing as the Khorne one, but not a lot of heavy mutations there. There's just so much to play around with. I like the fact that there is a different version of the Toad Dragon for you to play around with too, because, you know, mounts and just in general, you've got something there which should be more accessible to you. It should have been in general accessible to the Warriors of Chaos from the very beginning rather than it being a gift because it's not a demon. You do have a spear unit too. They've got javelins and they can actually fight alongside that. You can see the heroes, they look absolutely amazing. Like, styling here, there's certain things where modders do kit bashes for stuff, which just looks amazing. The hero of Nurgle looks a bit too similar to Tamacon for my liking, in all honesty. But I guess, you know, it's just how it is. Plus, finding just texture meshes for that, it can be a bit difficult. The generic Bruiser is probably my favorite. I know it's kind of stylized. It just kind of reminds me of some old school art, which I remember seeing and then just disappeared, I guess. There's a lot of stuff that Games Workshop wanted to do with units that just never made it to real life, or, well, made it to completion, I guess, is better yet said. But it's nice to get someone else's interpretation of this. We know that they were somewhat planned for Total War Warhammer 1, but never actually ended up coming out. So, yeah, mods will kind of fill in that little hole in the roster. You can find the mod in the description below, a direct link to it. Let me know what you guys think about the mod, and I'll see you all again very soon, guys. Have a good day.